Have you ever had that moment, you can absolutely crush a grammar test, get every question right, but then when you try to have a real, actual conversation, you just freeze? Yeah, it's a super common feeling. And the answer isn't about hitting the books harder. It's about understanding the secret, unwritten rules of language that nobody ever teaches you in class.
I mean, it's a crazy paradox, right? You've memorized all the vocab, you know the verb charts by heart, but when it's your turn to speak, your brain just goes blank. Look, this isn't because you're failing. It's actually a clue that points to a much, much deeper mystery about how language works. And today, we're going to solve it.
So to get to the bottom of this, we have to kind of reboot how we think about language altogether. It's not just a list of rules and words in a textbook. No way. It's a living, breathing system that exists right where our brains meet the real world.
And this brings us to a totally revolutionary idea from the amazing linguist Noam Chomsky. He suggested that our ability to use language is actually split into two different things. You've got the perfect, flawless blueprint in your mind, and then you've got the messy, real-world building that you actually construct with your words. So first up, you have what's called linguistic competence. Think of this as your deep, unconscious, gut-level knowledge of how the language is supposed to work. It's that little voice in your head that just knows "he go to school" sounds wrong even if you can't quite remember the name of the grammar rule. It's the perfect architectural plan for the language, stored away in your brain. But then, there's performance. And this is what happens when that perfect blueprint gets sent to the chaotic construction site of a real conversation. This is where even the smartest, most eloquent people say and like, or get tongue-tied, or completely forget a word because they're tired or nervous or just distracted. It's language in the wild.
Here's a perfect example. On a written test, you know without a doubt that the past tense of see is saw. That's your competence just shining. But get put on the spot in a conversation, and suddenly you might blurt out, "Yesterday I I saw." That little stumble, that's not a lack of knowledge. That is purely a performance issue.
And this difference is absolutely crucial. You see, on one hand, you have this perfect, idealized system inside your head. That's your confidence. And on the other, you have the messy, unpredictable reality of actually talking. That's your performance. Getting this difference is a real game changer for anyone trying to learn a language.
Okay, so Chomsky's idea is brilliant, but it kind of left a big hole in the theory. If having perfect grammar in our heads isn't the whole story, what else is there? What are we missing? Well, this is where another giant in linguistics steps into the picture.
This quote from linguist Del Hymes just hits so hard. He argued that if we only focus on perfect grammar, we're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. He said that a person who could speak in flawless sentences but had no idea when to say them or how to say them would be a linguistic monster. Technically correct, but, socially a nightmare.
And to avoid creating these so-called linguistic monsters, Hymes gave us the idea of communicative competence. This is the real prize. It's not just about being grammatically correct, it's about being socially appropriate. It's knowing what to say, who to say it to, and when to say it.
So this big idea breaks down into 4 key skills. First, you've got grammatical competence. Knowing the rules and the words, that's your base. Then sociolinguistic competence, knowing the social rules of the road. Third is discourse competence, knowing how to string sentences together to tell a good story or make a point. And finally, strategic competence, which is basically your communication first aid kit.
Let's look at an example. "What's up, principal?" Grammatically, perfect sentence, no errors. But sociolinguistically, oof, that's a train wreck. It's a complete failure to understand the social context. It shows that knowing the social rules is every bit as important as knowing the grammar rules. And what about that first aid kit, that strategic competence? Well, what happens when your brain just drops a word? Let's say you can't remember a refrigerator. You don't just stop talking, you improvise. You call it the cold box for food. And just like that, you've used a strategy to fix the conversation and keep it moving. That's a huge skill. Okay, so let's take all these ideas out of the textbook and see how they work in the real world. We're going to look at a super interesting case study, the story of English in the Philippines. This isn't just about a country learning a language. It's about a language finding a new home and becoming something totally new. So the story starts way back in 1898, when American teachers brought English to the Philippines. At first, it was a foreign language, but over the next 100 years or so, it didn't just stay foreign. It put down roots, it adapted, and it evolved into its own unique thing.
Now, linguists say it's in that nativization stage, meaning it's not a borrowed language anymore. It's a Filipino language.
So, what does this nativized English actually sound like? Well, you start to see these cool, unique local terms, sometimes called Filipinisms. For instance, in the Philippines, you don't ask for the restroom, you ask for the comfort room or the CR. For a speaker of Philippine English, this isn't a mistake at all. It's just the right way to say it in that context.
Here's another really cool one. The phrase, open the light. It's a direct word-for-word translation from the sentence structure in Filipino. It's this beautiful example of how the mental blueprint of one language can literally reshape another, creating a new phrase that everyone there understands perfectly.
And same with using ball pen instead of just pen. It's totally standard there. Now, the really important thing to get here is that linguists don't see these as errors. They see them as consistent, rule-based features of a legitimate, distinct variety of English.
So, when you understand that language is this messy, social, evolving thing, it completely changes how we should teach it. In fact, it's caused this huge earthquake in the world of language education.
You see, the old way of teaching was what we call the sage on the stage. That's the teacher who just stands up front and dictates grammar rules. But the new way, the better way, is the guide on the side. This teacher is more like a coach, creating situations and environments where students can actually build their own communicative competence, not just cram for a test.
Which brings us to the big takeaway. After all this, what is the actual point of learning a language? This is where everything we've talked about comes together for one final, really important insight.
We have to know the difference between an error and a mistake. An error means there's a real gap in your knowledge, your competence. You need someone to teach you to rule. But a mistake, that's just a performance slip-up. So when a student says, last night I studied, I studied. That self-correction proves they have the competence. They don't need another lesson. They just need more practice and more confidence. Because the real goal isn't to be perfect. It's not about never making a single mistake. The true reason we use language is for connection. It's about being able to share who you are and what you think with another human being, effectively and authentically.
So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. If language isn't about being perfect, but about being understood, what does that change about how you talk, how you listen, and how you try to connect with the people around you?